It is Star Wars Day, and when I first saw Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one, I said, man, this movie really reminds me of Star Wars. It had that same kind of feel. So tonight, I went to go see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, directed by James Gunn, the sequel to the first Guardians of the Galaxy, which a lot of people thought was the best MCU movie to date. A lot of people feel that way, and I can understand why. Guardians of the Galaxy 1 was so much fun and a blast to go see. And the sequel, of course, is one that I've been looking forward to for many years since I saw the first one. Well, it was about 3 years, but there you go. The cast from the first film, of course, returns. Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, Dave Bautista, Bradley Cooper, Vin Diesel, Michael Rooker. They're all back. And we also have some interesting veterans being added to the cast, like Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell in this movie. And of course, those guys have some of the best acting chops in history. So it's good to see them in the MCU. You know, when you really think about it, the MCU has every big actor. Not every single one, but there's so many huge actors that have been around for many years that have been in these MCU movies, even in small roles and cameos. It's almost like nowadays the cool thing to do is to be in an MCU movie, and of course you're going to make tons and tons of money because these movies always make money. But let's talk about Guardians 2. So the first thing I want to talk about, and we're not going to get into spoilers here, maybe a little bit later in the review. I'll give you a warning before we get into that, but the first question, of course, is it good? Yes. Very good movie. Very funny. Very funny movie. Lots of comedy sprinkled throughout the entire film, just like the first one. I thought the jokes really did hammer really well in this movie. And you had all kinds of different jokes, from puns to sexual jokes to, you know, visual gags. Some of the funniest stuff in this movie was the visual gags. Specifically, this one scene featuring Rocket and Yondu that looked like a freaking cartoon. I can't really spoil it right now, but when you see the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. I was laughing out loud in that scene. It was just fantastic work. And the thing about this movie that I have to really tell people when we talk about this film and here in this review is that it is very different from the first one. You still have the comedy, you had action, you had a huge epic third act, which was expected. I actually was wondering how they were going to be able to do like the first movie, because the first movie was total like Star Wars, you know, influence. This one was not like that whatsoever. I mean, there was a little bit of it, but not like the first one. But the thing about this film, the theme of this movie that I think that James Gunn is really hammering home is the theme of family. Of course, if you've seen the trailer, you know that Peter Quill meets his dad in this film, finally, after the big mystery of the first film. And so you have that story continuing in this film, and it's interesting because the main thing they're hammering home is the importance of family and the fact that, and this is not just in the Peter Quill character, you also see it with Gamora and with Nebula, and you also even see it with Yondu, which I think Yondu, played by Michael Rooker, was really the MVP of this film in many ways. The theme is that, you know, when it comes to family, sometimes people who are closest to you and who you love the most and whom you admire and respect are not necessarily those who are blood relatives. The movie really hammers home the fact that just because somebody is related to you by blood, biologically, does not mean that they're really your family, and that there are people in this world whom we grow attached to, people who are not blood relatives of ours, people who are at some point in our lives strangers, sometimes even rivals, which is really covered in the Yondu-Rocket relationship. And I feel like the movie tells you that, you know, sometimes these people can mean as much to you as a real family. They are your family. I really love that. This movie is so much more emotional than the first film, significantly more. I mean, there were scenes in the first film, of course, of Peter Quill's mom passing away and that struggle. All of that gets expounded upon tremendously in this movie. I think the first movie has more action. Like, actually, if you were to time it out, I would think the first one has more action, but this one has so much development. And what I think James Gunn has done with this movie that I think a lot of these comic book movies are starting to do, like Logan had it, is really have these strong, multi-dimensional, or multi-layered is what I mean to say, characters that have these interesting, quirky relationships. And it's not just two characters. This movie has a quirky relationship with several characters during different parts of the film. I mean, they address the Peter Quill relationship with Gamora. They address Drax and his funny little, friendship with a new character by the name of Mantis who was in this film. So there's a lot of really good emotional stuff in the movie. The movie is very heavy emotional as you go through it, as the story starts to unfold. It really hits you in the balls. If you're a guy, if you're a girl, it hits you in, your special spot as you go through the movie and you see how things develop and how these characters get to know each other. The first movie, we really were introduced to these characters. Here we really go in depth. Now, there's a couple of things that I wish they would have focused on more, but I guess they didn't have enough time. There's not too much of Drax the Destroyer in this movie. He's really funny. He's a comedic guy. Same thing with Rocket, but there was not a lot of backstory with him and not a lot of truly, emotional character development with Drax. That's the one character that I thought was a little bit left out, but there's tons of it with everybody else. You understand more about Nebula and why she hates her father Thanos so much and why she has that vendetta against her sister. That's explained. You find out the true fate of Peter Quill's mother and her relationship to his father. You find out the importance of Peter Quill's relationship to Yondu, which was only briefly talked about in the first film. In this movie, you have a complete character arc for the character of Yondu. Just fantastic stuff. Very well done. Very, very, just what a great movie. And it's tough because I think the first one's probably the one that I will watch more because it's a little bit more fun. But this one is definitely emotionally heavy. It's very heavy emotionally, and I cannot sit here and say a bad thing about the characters in this movie. It was a little bit too long, and you could sort of predict one of the twists later on about what a certain character is, behind and whatnot, and what their real motives are. You can sort of see that coming, and that's a problem. Like, that's something that Marvel movies have had for a while. And the thing is, another weakness that a lot of these movies have is that the villains are usually not that great. That's not the case in this movie. The villain in this film, which again, I'm not going to talk about because it's a spoiler, has a lot of very, very good development. And he eventually becomes a twirly mustache villain in the third act. But the story of who he became and how he became it was way, way better than expected. And you can tell that James Gunn is having a fun time in the movie. The only thing that I felt the movie was lacking, I think, of course, I wanted more Drax, but also I thought the movie was a little bit too long. It's about 2 hours and 18 minutes roughly. I think it's right around there, 2 hours, 16 minutes maybe. It's a little too long, and I thought that they spent, like, the second act, I thought, my opinion, was a little bit too, it was dragging on near the end. I wanted them to hurry up and get to where they're supposed to go, and there's this whole sort of jailbreak scene, which I'm not going to, again, no spoilers yet. Later on, we'll talk about it. That I thought went on a little bit too long. It was sort of like what they did in the first movie, but they stretched it out a little bit with Yondu and a couple other characters, and it just felt a little bit too long. That's the way I saw it. And now, the movie does have like 4, I guess, mid/post-credit scenes that I thought were really well done and very interesting, which we're going to talk about in the spoiler section here shortly. But I like this movie a lot. I don't think it's on the level of Civil War or Doctor Strange or even the first one, but it was definitely, character-wise, it's some of the best writing I think we've seen in the MCU. I mean, I really feel that way. It really nailed you emotionally. It wasn't as, incredibly, I guess, tear-jerking as Logan was, but it did what it needed to do, and you really, really relate to all the characters, especially Chris Pratt as Peter Quill, because he really shines in this movie as a conflicted guy. I thought the twist near the end, like I said, it was a little predictable, but also it was almost too quickly sewn in, but it's still, I think, Chris Pratt did the best he could, is what I'm trying to say. He did a fantastic job. Everybody nailed it. Special effects, of course, is great. This movie is so creative as well. There are things in this film that we've never seen before in a movie, like ever. Certain kinds of ships, certain kinds of, like, a lot of sci-fi stuff, certain kinds of vehicles, certain kinds of weapons that we have never seen before on the screen. We've seen it in novels and comic books, but never on the screen. So I thought that James Gunn was very daring in how he put this together, and definitely big kudos to everybody at Walt Disney Studios and Marvel Studios, because I'm sure that creating this movie and the visuals was such a crazy, crazy job because of how it looked. It's just, you know, it was just something that was just kind of mind-blowing. It's very colorful, you know, and it's a movie that, it's weird because there is profanity in this movie, but I also feel like this movie's going to attract a lot of, you know, younger people because it's so colorful and it's a fun movie. At the end of the day, it's a very, very fun movie. Now, my opinion, thumbs up, go see it, especially if you're a fan of the MCU and if you're a fan of the Guardians, the first one, you're going to like this one. Don't expect too much from Drax other than a little bit of comedy here and there, but he was really funny. Not that much Drax action, maybe in the next one or maybe in the Avengers film. So I just want to say that. And also, I thought the soundtrack in this movie, good, not as good as the first one, my opinion. Now, spoilers, okay? I'm going to give you guys a second to click off if you haven't seen the movie yet. I'm going to go into some light spoilers about the movie, all right? Not anything super intensive, but we're going to talk about it, okay? Except for, well, one thing, and that is, of course, the fate of Yondu. I thought Yondu dying at the end and saying, you know, he was your father, but he wasn't a daddy is incredible because there's so many people out there who grew up without a father, and yeah, somebody donated sperm, but they're not really your father, and that's, of course, Ego the Living Planet. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about, that he had this quest that seems like a very, they made it seem like his journey or his mission, his purpose, he called it his purpose in the movie, was a very benevolent thing, but then it becomes a really twisted, kind of selfish, egotistical thing, which, you know, I thought was, again, very well done. Much better villain than a lot of the other ones, but of course, you got Kurt Russell in there, you know, the dude's a legend. You can't even deny that. And then you've got also Sylvester Stallone. I wish he had more screen time, but he definitely nailed it when he was in there. I also thought that the Gamora stuff was handled pretty well with her sister. Of course, if you have read the comics, you know that Nebula does eventually wind up with the Infinity Gauntlet. I don't know if they're going to do that in the movies. I don't know, but I really like how she's kind of a tweener character. She's not a villain. She's not a good guy. She's right in the middle, and her quest, like everybody else, including Drax, is to kill Thanos. So, of course, that's going to be going on to the next one. I was kind of bummed out that Thanos was not in the movie, though. I wanted to see a small scene with him. He wasn't in it, so that sucks, but I mean, what can you really do? You also had the Sovereign people in there, and of course, the post-credit scene with, of course, if you saw the movie, you know, Adam Warlock, the Cocoon. So I originally thought that Adam Warlock was going to end up being Peter Quill's dad in the storyline, not in the comics, but in the movie version, and they went with Ego instead. Interesting choice, but I'm curious about where they're going to go with the Adam Warlock character. He's probably going to be a villain at first and then become good, which is not what I was expecting, but I think they're going to take it that way. Also, Howard the Duck's cameos in this movie were fantastic. Seth Green actually did the voice. I thought that was really, really cool, and I loved the teases for the upcoming movies, as well as the Watchers. That's what popped me. They showed Stan Lee talking to the Watchers. We haven't seen the Watchers. I was waiting for them to show the Watchers in the MCU. They're here, and I loved it. So lots of little homages to the comics that I thought went very, very well. Anyways, that's it for my review. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you're going to leave spoiler thoughts, pretty please put spoiler warning in the comments. I would just really appreciate that. But either way, I am hoping that people who have not seen the movie will stay away from the comments section because, you know, as much as I love reading comments and responding, there are some pretty big twists in this movie that I think should be saved for the movie theater. Again, a little predictable, but still fun. I liked the movie. It was very funny. Not as good as the first one, but much more emotional. Those are my thoughts. Give me yours. Thank you for checking out the review for Guardians 2, and I will talk to you guys next time.